What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another market review preview. I feel like I've been gone forever, but I'm super excited to be back here with you to preview the upcoming week here in the markets. And it's going to be a fun one because we're going to get two major earnings reports that I know I've been waiting for quite some time. That's going to be Tesla and Google on Wednesday. And so we're going to go through the broader markets, look at individual tickers, and get you set up for this week, which will be, and I have to check my watch here, July 21st through the 25th. Just want to start by going through the data that we're going to get this week here. So we'll start with Monday, not really much happening. Tuesday, we are going to get Jerome Powell speaking at 8:30. Someone's going to ask him if there is a Q&A session about the recent comments by President Trump, so pay attention to that, but nothing really there on Tuesday. Fed Bowman's going to be speaking. On Wednesday, we'll get existing home sales. It'll come in at 10 a.m., so that will move the markets a bit. And then when we come over to Thursday, we are going to get initial jobless claims, which we'll be paying attention to just to see the health of the labor market. And then we get durable goods orders on Friday at 8:30. So a pretty light week in terms of data. But the real thing that we're looking at is going to be Wednesday, and I'm pulling this up here because we're going to get two major earnings reports, and that's going to be Google here, and that's going to be at market close. And then we are also going to get Tesla. So that's going to be very big for the markets in terms of what's going to happen. I'm here for it. I can't wait to see what transpires, but wanted to put that on your radar, what is coming your way. So let's just jump in here, taking a look at the broader markets. What we have here, really, we've been moving sideways. If you look back here to July 3rd, we've just been moving in a range, and we have been making new all-time highs. We made a new all-time high on the SPX here on Friday, sold down a little bit. But it looks like after this period of sideways movement and consolidation that we should get a little bit more movement to the upside. So that's what I'm anticipating here. And you can see on the VRVP, we do have this nice thick volume node where there is some volume to catch us if we would fall down. But the thing to keep in mind as we get closer to August, when things typically get weak, we are due for a pullback. That doesn't mean that it's going to come right away, but we have to have that in mind because it's going to eventually happen, and we have to know that's an eventuality in the markets. You can't time the top. You just have to trade with the trend, have tight stops, be willing to admit that you've lost a trade, but there does look like there's a little bit more upside here. If you just look at the last time when it's moved sideways like this, you had a nice move higher, probably a nice move higher. So just keep an eye on that, especially with the light data week. If we hop over here to the Qs, again, new all-time highs on the Qs. We're above all of our moving averages. We haven't come down and touched that 20-day exponential moving average since June 23rd. So we have not had much of a pullback here on the Qs. A little bit overbought on the RSI, a little bit of an uptick in bearish volume. But again, does it need a rest? Yes. Does that mean that it's happening? No. So we're just going to continue to follow this trend upward until we start to see some weakness come into the market. IWM, if we look at this chart, we could see that there's a lot of room to the upside here on IWM. IWM, if we look at this chart, we can see there's a lot of room to all-time highs. And we finally did break above all those moving averages, but we've also just been moving sideways here. You can see the point of control is right around that 222 mark. We did have some selling come in on Friday right here, that volume node on the VRVP. We've seen an uptick in volume. We're not overbought. And so can it take out that new all-time high at 245.13? Sure, it can. The last time we hit an all-time high on IWM, you have to go back to November of this past year. And really, we're back to prices where we were last July. That's very interesting. But there should be some upside movement here if we get any type of hints to rate cuts. But there's definitely some opportunity. When we come over and take a look at the DIA, the Dow Jones Industrial, this upper trend line resistance has been formed with lower recent highs. We're close to an all-time high. This has retested its 20-day exponential moving average, and that happened on the 16th. And so we're getting a nice little pullback here. We're going to see if this wants to break out above that resistance and make a new all-time high. And more than likely, that's going to happen before it's all said and done with. I think that we'll probably see all-time highs both on the DIA and IWM before we get any meaningful pullback. So we just want to keep an eye on that. And then we take a look at Bitcoin. To me, this looks like we're going to go higher. We consolidated, we moved sideways really from May into the beginning of July, and that's when we had that pop. We got up there to 123,000. Now we're retesting down into this 10. I wouldn't be surprised to see 130 hit, which exceeds my price target for the end of the year. But seeing 130 hit here before we get some type of meaningful correction. So I'm actually going to change I'm going to change this to 130. And 130. And that's not my end of the year target. This is price target before pullback. So I think we hit 130, and then at that point, that's when we'll have a meaningful pullback. But Bitcoin has been just really bumping along with all of the crypto space. And then just taking a look at TLT. TLT is coming back down, and the all-time lows at 80.55. Can this fall lower? Sure it can. And again, TLT will typically run when there's threats of weakness in the market or concerns about the economy. Let's see if something like that happens. A play that you could run here is to just buy some shares or even some calls as this continues to get cheaper, and make sure that they're long dated so that whenever there is something that comes up in terms of a spike in volatility or fear, weakness in the market, you can capitalize on the upside move in TLT. So I'll keep watching that one. The 10-year Treasury, after getting a nice move higher off of this spinning top candle from July, did a little bit of a retest down into that 10, but really it's just been sideways for quite some time, down slightly on Friday. And then the VIX just continues to hang out down here at the bottom near that 100 estimate on the weekly. Are we going to come lower? If it does, we'll continue to see upside movement in the stock market and equities. But keep in mind with the VIX, it's only going to stay down here for so long before you have some type of event that injects fear into the market. Considering maybe some long dated VIX calls could be something that you look at too. But right now the volatility is pretty low. So just looking at everything in totality here on the broader markets, there is room to the upside here for things to push higher. From a logical, technical perspective, we are overbought on the SPX, on the Qs. We're extended to the upside. We're in need of a pullback, but remember, markets are irrational and are going to do what they want to do. So just because they need that doesn't mean that we're going to get it, but we do need to be mindful of the fact that this is typically a weak time of year heading into August. All right, so let's just take a look at a few tickers here. We're going to start with Roblox. Look at this weekly candle on Roblox. That is just beastly. We have earnings that are coming up here on the 31st of July, and it looks like taking out this new all-time high is an inevitability. It's going to happen. My son is a big Grow Garden player. He said that Roblox set a new record with 21 million people playing simultaneously Grow Garden. So I wouldn't be surprised to see an even higher move tomorrow whenever the market opens. But Roblox has just been so strong. And if you look at Roblox, for the longest time, it just moved in a range here and just built support before it started its run. And the reason I show that to you is because Roku looks very similar to me. Now, it's not exactly the same, but after it hit those highs in 2021, when it was up at $492, and it dropped, it's just been moving sideways, and it hasn't really broke out yet. But if this thing could get going, it can have a similar move to what we've seen on Roblox. And so that's why I'm actually watching this one at the top of my list for day trades. I day traded it a few times this past week, but I do think there could be an opportunity here. So keep an eye on Roku. I'm also watching HIMS because this lower support trend line has been established after this big gap down. we could see that we've touched this thing 4 times, most recently this Friday. We are above the 10-day exponential moving average, sitting right on that 20, and the resistance above us is at that 50 at $53.65. So there could be a nice little short-term play to the upside here. What we really want to watch to see is on this daily chart is, can we fill this gap here if we mark out the bottom of that wick up to $61.49. So I am watching HIMS to start this week for potentially what it can do. Remember, HIMS, if it gets moving, can move fast and furious. So that gap fill up at 61.49 is something to keep an eye on. Apple, this is my biggest position right now. And again, I'm committed to this for 6 to 8 months. I like the support that this established after the lows from tariffs. You could see here buyers stepping in on 4 separate occasions, and right now you can see we climbed out of there, finally got above that 100-day simple moving average. The 10 actually crossed up through that 100, and we have the 200 EMA and the 200 daily, and we also have the 50 SMA on the weekly above us. So this sideways movement, this pressure, uptick in volume, some decent bull volume that came in here. We do have some upper wicks. This is all ahead of earnings on July 31st, which will be next week. Sets this thing up for a nice move to the upside. Apple has been a laggard while everything else has moved in the big tech space. Apple has not. And so eventually money will flow back into this. If you just look at the chart, what has happened when Apple has been beat down before? It's pushed higher, right? So these things are cyclical. Apple's going to get a move. I'm committed to this long term. Let's see what happens. Even if this were to come back down into the support, I would be a buyer, but I'm continuing to watch Apple for an upside move here. Continuing on, we have Super Microcomputers finally closed above its 100 simple moving average on the weekly. And just taking a look at where we are, there's nothing above it. We have this gap that needs filled up here at 86.53. So going to watch to see if it can do that. We want to watch this most recent high back here of 66.50 as being the next point of resistance. And you can see the way this thing has been moving, sideways, pop on SMCI. We have had some nice opportunities. The trade desk finally got a nice big pop here off of news that it was added to the S&P 500. It got up to 87 actually in pre-market, but then it sold down. It actually closed its gap there. And really, it's above the majority of its moving averages. We have this 50 curling up to 200s here. Let's see if it wants to test that 200 at $92, if it finds some rejection there, or if it breaks above. And this one's all-time high is up here at 141. So if it wants to get moving, it can, and it does have some space. In terms of Google, this has been another laggard, and we're above all the moving averages. We have this gap to fill up here to 204.25. They're going to be reporting on Wednesday, and I'll go into a more detailed analysis on this in the earnings preview video that I'm going to do. But you could see that this one is set up for a move. They are reporting Wednesday, so check out that video for an update on that. And while we're talking about earnings, let's talk about Tesla. Again, check out the full-length video that I'm going to do on Tesla. We have this upper trend line resistance that was established back in December that has been holding this thing down. Interestingly enough, we've had some buying that has come off this 100 simple moving average on the daily. And typically when you get this kind of structure that's built out, if you could break that, then a significant run could come into play there. Just keep an eye on that. If you go back to this trend line here, you could see what happened when we broke above that last July, right? We got a nice push. It did come back and retested below that to the 100 before making a push higher. But that's what this is reminding me of. There's not as much time that has built out this trend line resistance, but it's something to pay attention to. Again, check out that video that I do, full-length video on Tesla earnings. That'll be coming up just to give you an idea of how to play that. NVIDIA, look at this weekly candle on this one too. Man, this thing finally broke out of that resistance area, just continues to push, new all-time high. You would think this thing's got to cool off at some point, but I think it'll touch 180 first before we start getting some selling coming in. So I'm going to mark that out there, 180. So just keep an eye on that. And it's good to see NVIDIA running after really just hitting its head on that resistance for such a long time. It's probably got a little bit more room to go before it cools off a little bit. Coinbase. Now this is textbook reversal stuff here. We have You can almost call that a gravestone doji at an all-time high. There is some indecision here that typically is a signal of a reversal, but as strong as crypto has been, Bitcoin has been, you don't want to fight against the trend, but that is something to pay attention to there. That doji at a reversal area, we could see Coinbase cool off. Microsoft, Chris Carter, all it does. Microsoft, Chris Carter of the stock market, all it does is print new all-time highs up to 514.60. When is this one going to cool off? It doesn't look like it's going to cool off anytime soon because it just keeps pumping. If we take a look at Amazon, Amazon does have some room to the upside. It's climbing, but it hasn't been a massive mover like Nvidia, like Microsoft, like Meta. And you can see where we are right now. We have this gap overhead to fill up to 236. So keep an eye on that. They're going to report earnings on the 31st along with Apple. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen here with Amazon. And then Netflix, and really sticking to that 20 right there. I actually sold some puts at 11.25 because if you look at this thing, it's just been a beast and the earnings weren't bad at all. And in fact, the price targets were raised to 1,500. So I think this is something that is going to cool off for a little bit, but then will bounce. This thing needed that breather. It's getting it right now. Let's see if it wants to come down a little bit more. But I think any kind of dip on Netflix is a buying opportunity. And you could see that it dropped very much on the RSI. So definitely watching Netflix. And I wouldn't be surprised if it pulls a BlackRock. So let me go over to BlackRock here. I want to show you guys this. I know Paulo likes BlackRock, but BlackRock, look, dropped, gap down on earnings. And then what did it do? Bang, it got bought up and made a new all-time high. I would not be surprised if we see a similar type of process here on Netflix. So just keep an eye out on that one. And then Meta, we look like we want to come down and retest that 50 estimate on the daily. You did have a hammer candle come in here. So there's probably a little bit more downside here on Meta before we get any type of bounce. And yes, if we come over to the weekly, we could see that double top is still in play, but that would be quite the fall for it to take out that neckline there. I don't really see that happening. And let me just take a look at a few other tickers here. Adobe is one that I continue to watch to see if it can come down to this lower trend line support here around 324. The biggest concern that I have with Adobe is that it's a software company that is really being challenged by cloud-based companies. And is this going to be an obsolete company if they're not able to innovate or catch up? This trend line does go back to 2018. We hit it here in 2022. Are we going to hit it again? It's worth a shot for me. So that's what I'm watching for and to see if we can get it. So I'll keep watching that one before I take a play on that. Robinhood, very similar type of setup that we saw on Coinbase. If I just zoom out here, again, new all-time highs. We have a doji candle, which can signify a reversal. You're overbought on the RSI, so just keep an eye on this one if it wants to start giving some back. MU is down into what was the strongest of resistances for the longest of time. That's found a little bit of a bounce. If it continues to drop, then it's going to fall back into that range-bound pattern that it was in for quite some time. SoundHound, this is one that Paulo is keeping an eye on here. We filled this gap back on July 8th, dropped. Now looks like we're about to retest it. We're above all the moving averages. We did get a golden cross on this guy, so let's see if this one wants to push. SoundHound could be a good play here in the coming weeks. Let's see if it wants to get moving. You could also argue that you have a double top here. Higher high, lower high, double top. You just have to watch this neckline area, but there's lots of support there that it'd be difficult to break. They're going to report earnings on August 7th. UNH is going to report on the 29th, and this, what looked like to me, is a bear flag. We're starting to come back down. I still continue to be cheap on this, having that 188 price target to buy. What I would watch on this one is the bottom of this hammer candle. When this thing got bought up, this was on the 15th of May. If we could take out that lower wick, we can see some pretty ferocious selling. Can we hit that 188 mark? I don't know, but I would be a buyer at that spot. ExxonMobil got up and tested that trend line, knocked back down, got close to it and knocked back down. And it looks like it wants to come back down to that 200 SMA on the weekly. That might not be a bad area to sell some puts or even set up a bull put spread, because oil's been beat up for quite some time and it is in need of a move, a sustained move, because it hasn't gotten one. So let's see if we get some type of tension in the Middle East that spikes oil and this thing pushes. I'll be watching it just to remind myself. I'll have to set up the numbers, but I'm going to bull put spread. So I will actually study that out and set that up later this week if we can come down to that 200 SMA. I do like that. And let me just come through a couple more tickers here. Boeing pushing higher. Earnings is coming up here on the 29th. You have that 100 SMA monthly, which it hasn't been over in a long time. If it clears that, then this thing could start challenging all-time highs 445.80. So keep an eye on Boeing. And let's take a look at a few more here. Just trying to see if there's anything else I want to take a look at. Let's do BBAI. This is for Paulo as well. So again, this thing has a nice spike in volume, pushing back up. We have this upper trend line resistance. We just want to see a break of that if this thing's going to push. So we'll see if it could test that recent high that it made back in February, little over $10. So watching that one. And then WOOF, WLF, again, we're above the majority of the moving averages, but when you shift over to the weekly, you could see that 200 is acting as resistance right now. And then when you go to the monthly, you could see you have even more moving averages above it. So just want to watch this one. There's a gap to fill up here to 628. Let's see if it does that. And that would be a nice short-term profit-taking area for WOOF. And let's take a look at TEM, our Courage community. And really this thing to me has just been range bound, just chopping sideways. Right now, if we take a look at this, you did get a golden cross back here. We are being compressed in between the 50 and the 100-day simple moving average. You have this thick volume node. If it's able to bust through there, short-term price target up to 74.81. So there could be some opportunity, and they are going to report earnings on August. And then CrowdStrike, the last one. This one's for Scott. So this one hit a new all-time high here on July 3rd. Pulled back. It's found support here on the 50 simple moving average on the daily and the 20 EMA. We came down from being overbought. The volume has fallen since its last earnings. You don't have earnings on this guy until September 2nd, so quite some time. You have the point of control way down here at 366. So this one could come up and retest its all-time highs, but it is a little bit extended. But you do have a nice little setup that you could try to ride this back up if this is in fact the support where it's holding. But this one, if I were to play it, I would play it with tight stops, quick, control my risk, because it is up here near all-time highs. So there you have it, an update in terms of what we're looking at this week in the markets. Again, not a lot of data. The most important things we're watching this week are on Wednesday with Tesla and Google reporting. Keep in mind that August 1st date when tariffs are supposed to truly take effect is creeping, and we have not had any trade deals announced. So just keep your head on a swivel, aware of any type of volatility and fear that can come in the market, because it will eventually come. There should be some opportunities out there. And I appreciate you guys for watching the channel, for supporting me. Thank you so much. Make sure you subscribe if you already haven't, and be ready for a ton of new content coming this week now that I am back from vacation. Make it a great day.